So I've posted some videos on this channel giving advice to you and showing some of my training and some of our travel away trips so far. But I thought it would be important to just sit down and make a video that tells a bit more about me and my journey as a pro and what things have looked like, so you can get a better understanding of who I am and what I've gone through and what my story looks like. And I'm even a guy who is really big into why I'm doing something, and I want to express to you what the purpose of this channel is and why I even started in the first place and the purpose overall behind it. So I thought it'd be important first to kind of just talk about my professional experience so far, and like I said, everything that I've gone through to now. So I played 4 years of college soccer at Wake Forest University, as you might know. We'll save some of those stories for another day. But I was the starter for 2 years. So my junior year and my senior year, I started almost every single game. Had a little bit of success. We went to the Final Four my junior year. My senior year ended up being the fall of 2020. So that was the year of COVID, when pretty much every other team in conference ended up postponing their season to the spring. We actually had a fall season, a modified fall season, where we played about 10 to 12 games or something like that in an ACC tournament. We had a good fall. I had a pretty good showing myself. And at the end of that fall, I'd been at Wake for 4 full years. And I started to have a little bit of interest from some professional teams, agents, whatever. I just felt like it was time for me to move on. It had always been a dream of mine to play at Wake since I was a kid. But there was something in me that knew, hey, I really want to move on to the next level and see what's possible for me. So I started exploring some of those options. I knew that the MLS Draft was coming up in January of 2021, and started to really look into how can I go pro and what that process looks like. So I started talking to teams, started talking to some agents. It was a tough time for me because I had no idea what it took to become a pro. And I had no idea, like I said, the process of finding an agent and reaching out to some of these teams, and just even the whole process of the draft. And so basically that year, teams will put your name into the draft. And I had no idea if my name was in it or not. And I think that the toughest part for me in that whole process was that I had backed out of going to school. I actually had a 5th year and a 6th year with COVID. I redshirted my sophomore year. And so I had the stability of staying at Wake for another year, potentially getting a master's, whatever it was. But deep down in my heart, I knew that I was ready to move on. And that was really difficult for me to know that I was leaving the school that I dreamed of playing for so long and moving on to something new. But that time period in between making that decision and when the draft happened in January was a pretty stressful time for me because, like I said, I spoke to a couple agents, but there really wasn't a ton of interest, or I wasn't hearing a lot. And I had no idea if my name was even in the draft list. And so draft day came. It was interesting because the draft this year, or that year in 2021, they had the first round completely televised and announcing the names on the live stream or whatever it was. And then the second and third rounds were all just names popping up on the website. So I had a teammate, Calvin Harris, who's now at Colorado Rapids, but he was projected to go like pretty high, and he was actually staying at my house because he's from England and he needed somewhere to stay here in the U.S. So we actually both went to our campus at Wake, and we're there at our locker room for the draft. And so he got picked number 2 on the live feed, and the rest of the time I was just sitting and waiting and just sitting there with my coaches. And the first round went, and my name hadn't been picked yet. And then the time came where it was just names popping up on a screen and just waiting and seeing what would happen. I had no idea what was going to happen. Fortunately enough, my name ended up popping up on the screen, and I got drafted to Orlando City in an MLS. And
oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Michael knows.
Hey!
There we
Good
go.
job. Give him the hat! Give him the hat! There you go. Congrats, buddy.
Nice to be back with Big Joe.
There you go, there's your scarf.
Give him the hat. Give him the hat.
Yeah, buddy.
Congrats, mate.
I
was getting kind of bored.
Yeah, I was getting bored. That's awesome.
Ready to pick me up. You got it early? No. Oh, all right. There you go.
It's funny you guys went back to back.
Yeah, 2 goalkeepers from the ACC.
It's awesome.
Joey Desart. Joey Desart right now is like,
I was really happy. I feel like the culmination of a lot of work all the way up until that point, and work in college and all those games in college, it was nice to have something to show for it. But at the end of the day, that was just a trial for me to go to Orlando and to do my thing there. It wasn't a sure contract. And to make things even tougher in this whole midst of the uncertainty of the draft and going pro, this year, since there was that college spring season, they had the option of a team to, you could go in later when your spring season was over and go and trial with the MLS team at that point. But for me, like I said, I knew that I was done with college. I had finished my degree. I had decided not to do the extra schooling or whatever. And Orlando had actually told me, hey, we'll see you in a couple months. And I told them, look, I'm either going to come now in preseason or I'm going to go figure something else out. Because for me, I knew that if things weren't to have worked out and it was May or June, whenever our spring season was over with Wake, that would have been the middle of the season for every other team and every other league. So I knew that getting a contract anywhere else would have been impossible, as opposed to if I went earlier in preseason and things didn't work out, there would still be some other options. So I ended up going down to Orlando that year for preseason. Around February was the time frame. And again, since it was COVID, the other draft picks actually were all staying in school. 2 of them came as the months went on, and then 1 went just like a complete year later. So the rules were all different because of COVID and whatnot, but I digress. So I drove all the way down in my car to Orlando, and I spent about a month there. And man, it was a good time for me. I think it took me a little bit of time when I got there to really show what I was capable of. The last week that we trained, we actually went to IMG Academy and just spent the week there and just did double days, and it was a time just to get really locked in without any external distractions. But up until then, I was just staying in a hotel in Orlando and just training every day with them, and I had no idea what was going to happen. I was just trying to make the most of every day and just show my best self and just be ready for whatever was going to happen. But at the end of that trip at IMG, the last night, they actually sat me down after the dinner and told me that they really liked me and they thought that I was better than they were expecting I was going to be. But they already had 3 keepers that they liked, and they knew that I wasn't going to play if I played for them. And there was no second team at the time. So they said they thought it would be best for me to find a different team, probably in USL Championship or something like that. And man, I remember going back to my hotel room that night and just being like, just defeated and just thinking, man, like to have put in an entire month with them and to have worked hard and thought I did really well, and for things to not have happened was really difficult. And to also, I didn't really have any other options. I mean, I kind of had some ideas of where I might go, but I was pretty heavily invested in being there and hoping that that was gonna work out. So that was one of the first tastes that I had of that moment of not really being sure of what was next, and just sitting in that uncertainty was a really difficult moment, just sitting in that hotel room trying to figure out what was next. But we ended up going back to Orlando, and they told me, hey, you can train here and as long as you want. And so I stayed for about a week longer, but every single day I was spending hours in the hotel room just looking up teams in USL and across the US and where there might be an opportunity for me, where a team might have needed a goalkeeper. And I reached out to a lot of them, and the answer from a lot of teams was, hey, we're already good for this season. And that was really tough. But I ended up having about 3 teams that had some interest. And I even had a buddy who played for Birmingham Legion in Alabama. And that was kind of close in geographically to where some of the other teams were that I was talking to. And so I told Orlando, hey, I'm going to go train with them. And there was a potential of getting a contract there. It wasn't crazy, but it was more than at Orlando. So I told them, thank you for everything, and packed up my car, and I drove up to Birmingham, Alabama, which was like a 10-hour drive from Orlando. So I've already gone from Charlotte down to Orlando, which is like 8 hours. Then Orlando to Birmingham, which was like 9.5 hours, something like that. I saw my buddy Bruno Lapa, and we got to catch up a little bit, and I trained with them for about 2 days. But on that second day, I ended up getting a contract offer from the Colorado Springs Switchbacks in USL Championship. And man, I was just super excited. This was my first professional contract. I was just really excited to get there and to get started. Yeah, so I was in Birmingham for all of 2 days. Wasn't really sure how that was going to go, but again, packed up my car. It was a pretty far drive from Birmingham to to Colorado Springs. So I actually had a buddy, a former teammate in college, Brad Dunwell, who played for Oklahoma City Energy in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And so that was about halfway between Birmingham and Colorado Springs. So I drove 10 hours in one day to Oklahoma City and then stayed the night with him, got to catch up with him, and then another 9-10 hours up to Colorado Springs. So in the span of just a couple months, I went halfway across the U.S. just trying to figure out what was next. So actually the opportunity in Colorado Springs came because their starting goalie from the year before got hurt in preseason. And I also had a buddy, shout out Steve Echeverria, who kind of got my name in the door in the first place. But I knew, hey, since their starting goalie from the year before was hurt in preseason, this might be a good opportunity for me to potentially get in there and play. And preseason, so there was another keeper who was on loan from the Colorado Rapids. And preseason, I got some minutes, but it was more with the backup team, and the MLS on loan keeper played more with the starting team. And so the season came around, we went to San Antonio and played our very first game and lost 3-0. And I had been in Colorado Springs with them for been about a month, 5 weeks or something up until that point, just with the rest of preseason that I had been there. And after that game, I was just curious, went to my goalie coach and was like, hey, is there any way I can get a meeting with you and our head coach, or just kind of figuring out where I stand and what they've seen from me so far in preseason. And we had a gym session the next day, and our head coach came up to me and he said, hey, there might be an opportunity for you this weekend. Just keep doing what you're doing, keep working, but just know that and be ready. And so we were playing Sporting Kansas City 2. That was when they were in USL Championship. And so that week, I just trained as hard as I could, just kept my head down, kept doing what I was doing. And the day before the game, I got called in the office, and our head coach told me, hey, I'm going to start you the next day in Kansas City, and just do your thing and just be ready. So we traveled to Kansas City, and man, I just remember, obviously I was a little anxious, just kind of not really sure what my pro debut, how it was all going to go. But I remember we got to the stadium, and this was my first time in Kansas City Stadium. It's a beautiful, beautiful stadium. But I remember us walking on the pitch to the locker room, just around the outside of the field to get to the locker rooms, and just kind of taking a second just to look around and just see the beauty of the stadium, and just really took in that moment. And it was just so nice to know that everything that I had been through in the past couple months of the uncertainty of the draft and the stress that came with that, and then to getting drafted, to working hard with the team and not getting a contract, and then being back at the bottom and not having anything, and coming up with this opportunity, just to know that in that moment, all that stress was worth it. And I was here about to make my pro debut. So like I said, I ended up starting that game. I think we won like 4-0. So that was a really cool moment, a really cool memory for me. I also started the next game. We actually opened a brand new stadium in downtown Colorado Springs, and we ended up losing. And then we had an off weekend the next weekend. And so the starting keeper from the year before ended up being healthy again from his injury. And basically for the rest of the season, he played the rest of the season. And man, it was a tough year. Just went from sometimes being on the bench to sometimes sitting in the stands and not even being rostered. And yeah, I think I learned a lot of lessons in college of how to manage being a backup and not playing, and just kind of dealing with some of the emotions that come with that. And I feel like I leaned pretty heavily on those lessons and just keep myself in a good mind state. But I look back at that switchbacks year and just see it as a time of just a lot of growth. Just as a person, for me, that was really the first time that I lived on my own halfway across the country. I don't really count college living on my own, because I was surrounded by teammates all the time and in a dining hall, which just provided us food whenever we wanted it. This was like the real first time I was like, had no family near me, having to cook all my meals, how to kind of deal with having free time. And again, just like I said, all those emotions that come with just the difficulties of pro soccer and the ups and the downs. So while it was a difficult rest of the year not playing and not contributing to the team, I feel like it was a much needed time for me just to figure out who I was and what I was about, and how to handle, again, some of these moments and these emotions, and just how to take care of myself and my body. And so, again, like I said, it was difficult. I think it was just a very necessary time period for me. The season came to end. We lost in the first round of the playoffs. And it was apparent, I didn't want to stay. I wanted to figure something else out, and it was mutual from the club. So I went back to trying to figure out what was next for me. And the difficult part this time was I actually hurt my elbow at the end of the season in one of the last training sessions. I had like a bit of tendonitis, and then someone shot so hard on me. I'd never seen a shot so hard, and I saved it, but it pushed my elbow back in a way that I ended up having some tears or something in there, like in my UCL. And so that off season, I actually couldn't even do goalkeeper training. I was only doing physical therapy, and then I would go out and train with the field players and just be like a neutral and just use my feet, which was tough because it was just the uncertainty of A, not knowing what was next from a team standpoint, and B, not even being able to catch a ball or do any of that. The timing of the recovery lined up nice where I was going to be ready right before a preseason would start, but just not being able to train and kind of give myself that certainty of training was it was a difficult off season. And so I sat in that off season just training and just being at home with my family over the holidays and all that. And my agent was reaching out to teams and trying to see where there was interest. And to be honest, again, there wasn't a ton of people reaching out. But one day, late December, I got a call, and it was from one of the goalkeeper coaches at Houston Dynamo. And I knew him from college. We had been in contact, and he told me about how there was a new league starting, MLS Next Pro, where every MLS team was going to have a second team. And Houston was going to be obviously one of those teams, and they were looking for a goalkeeper for the second team. And man, again, I was just super excited because I knew he had a great reputation of being a great coach, but just to have this opportunity and even, the connection to the MLS team. So we talked about it, and then a couple days, week went by or whatever, and they ended up sending me a contract offer, and I ended up taking it. And so I packed my bag, just packed my car up, drove all the way down to Houston, 16 hours, broke it up into 2 days. Yeah, now I was in Houston, and it was just a brand new adventure. And I think one of the toughest things about Houston was being on a second team. And obviously, when you're on a second team, the priority is not always winning games, but it's more so about developing first team players, young first team players to get minutes and to contribute to the first team. So it was pretty apparent when I got there that they had a young first team goalie who they were looking to develop, and also an academy goalkeeper that they were pretty high on. And while it was nice having a contract and getting there, first months I'd say were pretty difficult just because I actually didn't play a single moment in preseason. I played in an inter-squad game, but the homegrown keeper and the academy keeper were both the ones playing the minutes there. So again, a difficult moment, especially when you know that these guys are younger than you and you might be better than them. But sometimes you just have to learn how to play your part and just do what you got to do. But the season went on, and I actually ended up playing a couple games and doing well and really contributing to the team. So again, I think it was another year of just growth, but also I was playing more games this year, albeit I wasn't the starter for the whole year, but I was playing more games than I did and for the switchbacks. And I was also training with the first team a decent bit too, which was awesome just to see those reps and to learn from some of these older goalkeepers. And so that was a good bit for me. I think one of the moments that stands out was at the end of the season, we ended up playing St. Louis 2, who was the best team in the Western Conference, and we were just right behind them in second or third. And I got the start, and we played them at home, and if we won the game, we made playoffs. And I ended up making a pretty big save, and we ended up winning 1-0.
Ostrak and Diaz. Ostrak puts it in the area. Diaz, no shot. It's Watts. Oh, what a stop, Pittenberg!
Made the playoffs. It was a really awesome moment.
What's that smell like?
Yeah, it was just, I was really happy just to see that all the patience of the year and all the things that I had learned, I could just apply into that one game at the end of the season and help the team make the playoffs. And we ended up losing the first round of playoffs, which was tough, but I was on a 1-year contract with an option. And so in my end of the year meetings, they were telling me that they would love to have me back, but it would be in a similar role. And for me, I just knew that I wanted to find somewhere where there was a potential for being a starter. And they told me that, okay, if that's what you want to do. And so I started looking for other options. And again, just spending the off season at home, during the holidays, not really too sure what was going to be going on in the future. And just like a couple of days before Christmas, I got a call from the technical director at Charlotte FC. And we ended up talking about how they were starting their second team that year. That was actually their first year. And he said they wanted me to come on trial, potentially play for them. And so since I was from Charlotte, and even it seemed like there was going to be a better potential to play as a second team goalkeeper there than there was in Houston. So it's just kind of those factors being considered, I decided to go with them, go on trial. I actually ended up spending a week with the first team and then spent like 2 weeks with the second team. And again, I thought I did really well, thought I showed really well. And they told me and my agent that they'd have an answer after this one preseason game. And I was feeling good about how everything went and how I'd been training. And that night I got a call from my agent and told me that they weren't going to be offering me a contract. And it was another one of those moments, man. Just one of those down moments where you're just like disappointed that all the work that you put in was for nothing with this one team. Just again, having to start back at zero and figure out what's next, and knowing that teams are already in preseason and other teams that I've been talking to already had goalkeepers, and just not knowing what was next in my career. I remember I got that call from my agent, and I was just sitting in the car with my dad, and he looked at me and he was just like, "Do you really want to do this?" And I was just like, talking about pro soccer, and I was just like, "Yeah, man, like this is my life. This is like, soccer's always been my life. Goalkeeping's always been my life, and I know that I'll do whatever I got to do to get where I got to go." But I just remember that being a moment where it's just like having to really look in the mirror and just know that, man, it's just about just keep going and just knowing that something good was going to come. But I ended up actually reaching out to Houston to see if they had a second team keeper that to fill the spot that I had the year before, and they still hadn't. They ended up saying that they were interested and wanted to have me back. So there was a bit of a light there. It ended up being that they sent me a contract offer, and just like that, man, I was back in Houston, and I went back. And again, it was a bit of a similar situation, but man, I was just super excited to be back in a place. It was really nice to go back somewhere, if that makes sense, to where every other place as a professional, I've had to introduce myself, meet everyone, get kind of acclimated to the environment, and to walk back into somewhere and just to see familiar faces and people happy to see you was just amazing. And so I went back, a bit of a similar situation. I played a little bit more games that year, but still wasn't the absolute starter. Man, I feel like I just continued to grow a lot as a player, continuing to just sharpen a lot of areas of my game and to just continue to build that mindset of just always being ready for an opportunity, because some of those games just came so last minute of, hey, like you're going to be starting. So I feel like that was just a really good skill that I built there of just always being ready for opportunities. I also feel like Houston was just an amazing place that second year as well, of just building relationships with different guys on the second team, different coaches that I've had. I think that it was just a really special year from that, right? My goalkeeper coach was Ryan Thompson, who was the former Jamaican national team goalkeeper. He ended up actually being the goalkeeper coach for the U.S. national team at the Gold Cup that summer. And working with him was just incredible. He's an incredible coach, an incredible person, just an incredible mentor for me on and off the field, and just felt very blessed to have been back in that environment and to make that connection with him, because he wasn't my keeper coach the year before. But yeah, getting to meet him that second year, I think was really powerful for me. And I think it was just another year of just continuing to learn and grow and be ready, and did really well in the games that I got. And my end of the year meeting came again, and they told me they wanted me back on the second team again. I talked to, potentially about like a first team deal, but had three keepers that they're pretty high on. We ended up agreeing that it would be best for me just to figure somewhere else out where I could be an outright starter. So went back to zero of figuring out what's out there. And again, I think it wasn't as tough of a time as maybe these other moments, but I think, again, I was back at just what's next and trying to figure out what was out there. But something ended up coming up. There's a new pro team in High Point, North Carolina, which is just an hour and a half north of Charlotte, where I'm from, and it's 30 minutes from Wake Forest, where I went to college. And yeah, new pro team in MLS Next Pro, but it was going to be a independent, standalone team. And I ended up getting connected with them, with that team, and they ended up sending me a contract offer, and I ended up taking it. So that's actually where I am now here in High Point, and we've been in preseason for the past couple weeks now, working hard, and our season is just actually a week and a half away here. First game of the season. Just feel really grateful to be here, part of this team, part of this organization, and just ready to have a good year and contribute to the team however I can. Yeah, it's definitely been a journey. I've been all over the country, a lot of ups and a lot of downs, and I know that the journey as a pro soccer player, it's just going to continue to be like that. But I feel like one of the biggest lessons that I've learned throughout all this is just to, man, just enjoy the journey and just enjoy all the people that you meet. I feel like I've gone to so many new cities on the West Coast, being in the Western Conference and meeting people and going on adventures and going to different cities that I had never been to before. And so it's just been, like I said, it's been a journey, and just feel super grateful too. You know, my family has been there just every step of the way, coming out to games, being there for me just in some of those tough moments when things might not be going your way or you may not know what's next, but they've always been there supporting me. And so just super grateful for the journey, super grateful for family and just the opportunities to do what I love. And I think that this journey has also taught me a lot just about faith. You know, I'm a Christian, and just trusting in the process and just trusting in God and really relying and leaning on that during some of those darker moments when, like I said, you don't know what's next, and just having faith that there is something good around the corner if you just continue to work. This really comes into what the purpose of the channel is. You know, like I said, I've been through a decent bit just as an academy goalkeeper, as a college goalkeeper, and now as a professional goalkeeper. This is my 4th year I'm going into as a pro, and I feel like I've learned a lot. And I want to use this channel as a way to help you learn some of these lessons and maybe not have to actually go through them like I have. So I think that is crucial. And I think just documenting my journey and documenting just the path of what the next years will look like and the journey of all that. I'm here just to help teach you and to help you however I can, because I know that the journey, especially as a goalkeeper, is it's definitely, it can be lonely sometimes, just the nature of our position. It's just such a different position than what the field players play. I think having people and having a network of goalkeepers that can empathize and understand sometimes what you're going through and help you get through some of those moments, I think is super crucial. So that's why I want to create this channel, create this community. I think you might ask yourself, Invincible Goalkeeping, why did I choose that word? And I look at some of these moments that I've gone through and some of these tougher times, and I think that for me, professional soccer and just goalkeeping in general, like I kind of touched upon before, but it's all about just not giving up, and it's all about just pushing as hard as you possibly can, pushing yourself and continuing to work and just continuing to believe and knowing that there is something good if you continue to work, if you continue to believe, if you continue to invest in yourself and believe in yourself. And it's just about not quitting and just not going down and just, you know, being invincible. So I think that it's a word that embodies just that idea and that principle. And I know that whatever you're going through right now, the key for you is just to not give up and just to keep working and keep growing and just continuing to believe and know that, like I said, there's something good around the corner. So I hope that this video gives you a little bit more context and clarity of just my journey and who I am and why I'm even making these videos. But if there's anything I can do, any content that you would like to see, just let me know and we'll just keep this thing rolling. So I appreciate you sitting through this one and listening and hearing my story. And man, we just keep rolling and just keep working.